I just have them.
He was the chair. I don't know who that is.
Right?
I think it's me.
Okay, sounds good.
You came with an agenda, so I assumed it was you, because no one told me.
Yeah.
So this is
What?
your-
Hot. That's the muting.
So on all the time.
Except for if you push it, you're off.
See ya.
Okay.
Hold it down.
Got it. Hold on.
Recording in progress.
Okay. Hey, Tim. Wasn't expecting you.
Here is, brought this for you so you can see, let's see. There's the chart review committee.
Yeah.
Yeah, it says here, let's say here, just primary tier parcel. Green.
Okay, so yeah, we have the Services Committee meeting for July 7th, 2021. Can I get roll call?
David Capel.
Here.
Martin Fisher.
Here.
Greg Elliott.
Here.
Reed Brody.
All right, did everybody get a chance to read the minutes from the last services meeting on what day was that?
It was after
May.
that.
That's right. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Roll call?
David Capel.
Yes.
Martin Fisher.
Yes.
Greg Elliott.
Abstain.
2 yeas, 1 abstention. 1 abstention.
All right, we don't have any visitors, do we? Or do we?
Mr.
Hello, I'm a visitor.
Oh, okay. The mayor's a visitor.
Does that, do you get to sit here or do you have to sit over there?
Oh,
Where would you
that's a
like
good
me?
point. That's a good point.
I can stand at the
Other
podium.
side.
The chair right here.
We should just stand and throw it the whole time.
All right,
Make faces.
do you have something then that you want to review
No, I
in the
figured,
visitor section?
no, I felt like it'd be important, especially in this initial meeting with Mr. Elliott coming in new.
Brand new.
Me pulling back out of the committee, that some of the contextual items, I may be able to add value. But if
I
you don't
agree.
wish me to,
No, I agree completely. All right. Okay, so first order of business then is the Sunbury Mills after our last meeting. I believe we were deferring to Dave Breen after we met the last time about the street trees.
I don't even remember, to be honest with
It's
you.
been 2 months. Yeah.
I can add a little bit. So we have conflicting code, so municipal code and covenants and deed restrictions. So the HOA has a more restrictive policy on tree maintenance in Sunbury Mills. There is an element of the code that there's one street tree as deemed necessary by the grantor along the street of each lot. If the grantor determines to designate the tree, then the owners agree to install and maintain such uniform street trees. Each owner shall take care for and, if necessary, replace such tree or trees at the owner's expense with a like type tree. However, our code, and I'm going to paraphrase, states that trees in the right of way are the municipal obligation to maintain and care for. So a few years back, probably 2010, 2009, somewhere in there, the village passed an ordinance where new residential developments would not have street trees. Hence the difference between Sunbury Mills and Sunbury Meadows. That's kind of the point in time break. So you see Sunbury Meadows has the trees in the owner's yard, so it is exclusively the owner's responsibility. In Sunbury Mills, the planned development was, one yard tree and one street tree per every unit. So it would have been late last year, if I'm not mistaken, the village, acting in good faith, removed the diseased trees. I think there were 38 along 2 different residential streets. And the HOA earlier this year had reached out to all of the residents, basically saying, it's your responsibility to replace the trees. And that's where we have the conflict at this point. So in terms of what's been done since all of that, there hasn't been much other than just fact gathering. And here we are to discuss what's a logical step forward.
So the HOA is going to make the residents replace the trees at their own cost if we do nothing.
I believe that the HOA, if they were to really push the issue, they probably could obligate them to do so. I believe the right thing to do, though, in my opinion, would be, especially since we council, the services committee elected to remove the street trees, we could do something to make that right, whether that is, adhere to the HOA's deed restrictions by paying for the trees, it's part of the plan development that was approved, keeping like with like, grandfathered in, if you will. But it doesn't have to be done that way. The street does look drastically different without trees or street trees. I think everybody has a personal preference on this, but
So can I ask a question? The HOA, so what is the HOA saying?
the HOA right now is saying they want to come to an agreement with the municipality and we'll kind of respect our decision.
I guess with respect to the trees, are they saying, I guess, does a tree or do all of the trees or a number of the trees need replaced now? Is that the issue?
All the diseased trees were
Diseased
removed.
ones, they were removed already.
Correct. By the village.
Okay, so did we remove them? And did the HOA know we were removing them?
No, but the residents did. The HOA was not contacted. The deed restrictions were not contemplated, ahead of time. It was, the village believed that the responsibility of the trees in the tree lawn. And I would say, as a matter of fact, if there's an HOA, no HOA, that's the way that we've always viewed it.
Right, it's our responsibility. So, but the deed restriction is stating that it needs to be replaced.
Correct.
I think we had all intention of replacing it.
We did.
So
We did.
it was just a little or slower than the HOA wanted us to be at getting them replaced, so
Right.
that if they started sending out letters.
Right.
When I know one of the things we were talking about earlier was whether the residents would have a choice or not and whether they got
Correct.
trees, because maybe this would be an opportunity, and correct me if I'm wrong, the HOA doesn't specify the type of tree, right?
Correct.
So we could either provide everyone that wants us to provide, or if somebody wanted to get a different kind of tree on their own, then it would be between them and the HOA to do so, right?
Yeah, it's, what it does say is they should be of uniform type.
As I said,
That's a pretty broad term.
Yeah.
Broad.
It doesn't mean every tree has to be the same type of species.
So I guess the options are we replace the trees that we removed and that's the end of it. Or we give the homeowner the option, we replace your tree and we're gonna replace it with X, or you replace the tree.
I believe there would be, in that case, the second option that you laid out, I believe we would be in conflict with the deed restriction. A deed restriction can be more restrictive than the code. So in other words, like if you have an HOA, like there's certain things you cannot put on your property that you could if you were not in an HOA.
Right.
So there is still the restriction around tree replacement, the deed restriction saying these should be replaced.
Should we just replace them? And just call it a day?
And I think, yeah.
yes,
Yeah, I believe so.
we need to decide what we're gonna replace them with and then get it done. Pretty much, right?
And is this what is on this, the project cost, the 431? Or is this a different one? I'm sorry, this is street program. Never mind.
Yeah. I don't think we,
It was, it'd be 38 times, let's use round numbers, like $250 maybe. You get a discount, it's probably $200 for the tree, $50 to install. It's already been, stumps already been ground. Most likely they would shift the location slightly. So they would have to auger it, clean up, $50 a hole times 38.
Do we need to bid it out or would we do it? I guess who does it, the install? Do we go to a nursery and ask them?
There's firms that can do it. I would suggest it's not Brad's team. I think that he would prefer it's not.
Okay.
Probably, I think it would, a logical next step could be, okay, we're gonna replace the trees. Then it is, okay, what type of trees are we gonna replace it by? Let's get somebody that's certified or that, has, I know CT Consultants has, horticulture experts, arborists on staff, architectural engineers or whatever they're called, landscape architects, excuse me. Where they could tell you like, hey, here's the, what you should replace them with. You don't want to put all the same tree because then you're at risk of, this happening again.
Same thing.
You may be able to do like every other tree or, 3 different types of trees that have different tolerances.
You got 3 and 4 tree clusters.
Right.
So would our logical next step be to ask CT
PT
to
recommend a
make some
tree.
recommendations and bring them to the next meeting and move forward from
I would
there?
say in conjunction with Brad Gerwig's group too, because we could do some of that internally. I think, in fact, Brad, Dave and I are meeting tomorrow, so we can discuss.
I think that it would be a good idea too, to notify the property owners that would be getting the tree ahead of time so that in case anybody had any concerns, they'd have a little bit of time
That
before we show up and plop
Yeah.
a tree in their yard.
and the-
Send a
and the
letter out to
HOA.
all the
Yep.
homes.
And the HOA.
And the-
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
I think when they are replaced, I think we also need to reference the deed restriction. It's not, this is.
Yeah.
Take governmental HOA deed restriction away. It's a common sense thing to replace a tree with a tree, if that's how the plan was developed. But I think it is important that we reference, we're doing this and now, we're putting it back in. It's against our code, but the deed restriction is more restrictive. And it says it's your responsibility to maintain that.
Should we, our next meeting is in 2 months? Is that right?
August.
Next.
Oh, we have one in August? Okay. All right.
It's normally every month.
Okay.
This is a special case.
This wouldn't be the right time to plant a tree
Right.
anyway.
Yeah.
So there's no rush to do it other than to show your want of action. But if you waited another month to get together and further the discussion, we're not planting until September, October.
I was thinking October, but that's why if it's 2 months and then and then it's 2 months again, right? We're there. That's why I was asking. But you're right. October, we should be planting the trees.
The other, you just said something, Mayor, that I wanted to ask and now I've forgotten it. And so when I remember it, I'll interrupt again. Thank you.
So just hypothetically, if this happens again in a few years and we end up having to remove trees from the communities that have them, are we gonna do the same thing? Is this the precedent?
I would
That
say
we
it's a-
remove them and then replace them with
No,
like,
I would say it's the homeowner's expense. This is the time to right the ship.
okay,
We acted in good faith and found out that the deed restrictions put the ownership on the owner of the home. In between the time we had already removed them.
okay.
So I think this is the point in time where we say, okay, we're gonna replace them, do what, really residents should have been doing. Not that they could have prevented the blight from, spreading anyways, but it's gonna be their responsibility to maintain them and to, care for them. And if it dies again, it's their responsibility now.
And is it up to us to notify them if they need removed? Or is that up to the HOA?
That's what I was just wondering
I
too.
don't know. It definitely.
Steve
our-
Piles go around knocking on everybody's door. Need
So
to
it's
remove your
HOA?
tree?
What's that?
You said it's HOA.
I believe it would be the HOA. They write us tickets for everything else.
Last question on, one of my last questions on this. What about typically, you plant a tree, in 6 months it could die. So is there a warranty period that we would be responsible
Yeah,
for?
there's usually a year from if you buy like Acorn or something,
Right,
there's
so
a
we would
year
be
or
responsible
two.
for that then. Like the city would be responsible for, well, I guess the contractor would be, never mind, okay.
I don't know.
Whoever we hire to do it would replace it,
And then after whatever warranty period we have.
then it's the
homeowners.
homeowner.
Yeah.
Okay.
It makes sense.
So are we asking Are we gonna revisit this next month and ask CT to give us some recommendations? Is that the moving forward?
We could probably start looking for recommendations right now, I would assume, at least as far as what trees should we be looking at?
Can you guys help us with that?
Do you have the location of all the trees that were removed?
I don't know that we have the physical location. It wouldn't take much.
I've got that house.
It's 2 streets and 1 cul-de-sac, or 3.
That was Millstone and Mills.
No stream?
Court and Mill Street. and
Right.
Mill. There was technically 4 small streets.
Right.
38 trees, you're right.
All right. So then the next item is Sunbury Estates sidewalk repair and replace plan.
I'll give a very high level of this.
Please do.
It's kind of in the same
Not
vein.
familiar with this one.
So it's basically the same type of issue. Sidewalks are the homeowner's responsibility. And in Sunbury Estates in particular, they don't have an HOA. Some of I'll say the trees for the most part are the cause of the heaving of the sidewalks. I can't remember what type of maple, but they're planted so close to the sidewalk that, I mean, it is direct correlation, heaving, sometimes 4, close to 6 inches. So there's a couple ways that we can go about approaching this. One is, we've never dealt with this before. I'll put it that way. We've never gone through and said, hey, here's the plan that you follow if your sidewalk needs repair. We don't have somebody out walking the sidewalk saying, here's an exception that doesn't meet code. It's got more than 2 inches of a lip. So, it needs to be replaced. And then, some municipalities do like an assessment where basically they take care of it and then put it on your tax bill, send you a bill. There's other municipalities who basically say, here's the exception. If you don't get it fixed by this time, here's your options. Fix it with these like 3 preferred contractors who are certified in this type of concrete repair. But ultimately, we are to the point now where I would say there's definitely a safety hazard in that neighborhood in several areas. We've had at least one resident that I'm aware of that has actually replaced the sidewalk per our code. I want to say it's maybe one of the first times ever that somebody just kind of was like, listen, I'm going to take it upon ourselves to fix it. And we need to come up with a plan on how we're going to address this going forward. Many months ago, 3, 4 months ago, 5 months ago, we asked Steve Piles to go through it and say, okay, what would it cost to basically, preferably grind down the ones that can basically get, even, and, how many of those heavings would be taller than the ones that can be ground down. In other words, they would need replaced completely. And we got a cost estimate for the entire neighborhood. And I can't remember the cost, like round numbers, what, 50 grand?
No. It was 20, one number was 26. Yeah. It was more than that, all 30.
Okay, $30,000 to replace the entire neighborhood street. Along the same vein, one of the reasons that we wanted to be able to get the cost quote is to have just a baseline of, okay, what is the burden for the residents? And since we really don't have a good solid policy to address this, is there an opportunity where we do another, let's start the game over, come up with our policy, replace the sidewalks since we have a safety issue, fix the sidewalks, whatever you want to call it, fix the ones that we can fix and then replace the ones that need replaced. And then again, kind of hit the, the point in time. Now everybody in Sunbury Estates and the village going forward is responsible for this, because it will not be sustainable for the village to own that burden forever.
Once the meadows and all of them start having
Exactly.
issues, yeah.
Exactly.
How many homes are we talking?
150.
Yeah, that's about right. And so Steve, I had a company he was familiar with that had done some work in other municipality, and they did a sidewalk survey of all of some areas states. So we do have that document, we have that information. It's, I think, fairly fresh. It's 4 months old probably. So I think it's a good database, and something we can work from. The other issue you're gonna have there too, at some point, is the tree issue, and do you replace those trees knowing full well that some of the trees that were planted there in those very kind of narrow,
Strips.
right of ways, the sidewalk,
Tree lawn.
there, the tree lawn is, not conducive to trees.
Right.
And in fact, it's causing some damage to some of our storm drains and things of that nature too, which is, needs to be addressed. So you might consider, there's no HOA in some areas states that we know.
Right.
And so you may consider not replacing the trees there and being consistent with the code that exists for the Price Farms and the, the.
Right, Sunbury Meadows and-
That's absolutely your call, and that's just, but if we go into replacing all the trees and replacing all the panels of sidewalk that were heated by trees, you're gonna have a substantial amount of municipal money involved just in that part of it.
Right.
So 150 homes at 30K is about $200 a home, roughly. Could we, so if we put it in their tax bill, would that just be like, I guess, how does that work?
I don't know that you would do the proportional 30,000 divided by 150. I don't know that that would be the appropriate way to divvy up the cost. Truthfully, I don't know. This is uncharted territory. So
We do have the City of Delaware Sidewalk Replacement Program. It's a 5-year, maybe a 10-year cycle. They've divided the city up into 10 districts, and then they literally go around every year and assess or mark the ones that need to be done. And they have an engineering staff, and it takes some time and labor to do that. But they're getting to the point now where it kind of is good. But getting to the point, everybody in line, we've never had one here. There'd be a lot of sidewalks to do. So we have copies of this, the Delaware plan. We talked about doing something like that, and happy to rekindle that and give that information to Steve, I guess.
I think that's a good
I
idea.
think, yeah, I think we should start somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And so how, with the Delaware plan, again, how do they charge? Do they charge residents or is it?
Well, yeah, oh yeah, they do. And the onus is on the resident to do their, to repair their sidewalks. But what they do is they mark all the ones that need to be replaced, and then they go around and get a contractor to come in and get a low price, per unit price, to do the 150 panels that are deficient. And if the neighbor or the resident opts to do that, they get a pretty darn good price. They get it done quickly and really $150 per panel, and they're out. And if they opt not to, that's up to them, but then that's on them to do it, and that's when it gets assessed. They'll either, the individual can either opt to have their own contractor do it yourself, because you've got to do it to code.
Right.
Or they can have it done and mandated by the village, and then the village will charge them a contractor price and put it on their, and they will assess them for it.
Gotcha.
the difference though, in that situation, in our situation, is there are residents who, on their property line do not have messed up concrete. And so if we're taking the $30,000 and spreading it across everybody,
Right.
like the lady who just replaced it on her own, that's where I don't think it would be proportional. You would need to come up with some calculation like, okay, this person has 2 street trees, because they're on a corner lot, there's $600 for this person, then $400 for this person.
Do we do it per panel, like Alan said? Yeah.
Well, the challenge you run into is that repair, you started this conversation with the statement, the repair of these sidewalks is the responsibility of the homeowner.
Right.
So what you're now doing is you're taking Joe's responsibility to fix his sidewalk and you're making me pay for it.
Right.
And I don't think that's one fly.
I don't understand.
You can make him pay for his sidewalk, which is what these assessment projects do.
Yeah.
They make you pay for the sidewalk you were supposed to fix, that we had to fix for you because you didn't. But yeah, to do sort of what you're suggesting would, I think, you know, here's a guy that's gonna answer the question. But I think that's a tall task.
Yeah, I understand. I get it. Okay.
I will say, just briefly, I have a lot of experience in sidewalk assessment programs. I did the entire city of Reynoldsburg over 7 years. I think I read the Delaware program, and it's really good. It's very similar to what we did in Reynoldsburg. The one thing, if I'm remembering my different programs correctly, Delaware has pages upon pages what to do with tree roots. You can't go in and just hack off the tree root. You'll kill the tree, it'll fall over in the street. And so it depends on how big the root is and how far from the tree it is. And it's just, they got math equations on whether you can take the tree root out. And if you can't, now you got to find a solution to get around it. And then the other thing that happens is if you can't take it out, now you need a border, because that tree's going to keep growing. That root's going to keep growing, and you'll be right back 3 years later, heaving your brand new sidewalk. So you've got to put a barrier in, and those barriers get a bit pricey.
Those are like metal barriers, basically, like a plate.
It's a yes, something like that. I don't know if it's. They didn't have this problem. They didn't have a tree problem. Yeah, right. Now, I live just outside of Dublin, and Dublin's got more money than they can spend in a year, and it just piles up in corners. And so one of the things they do is Dublin, I shouldn't say that, we're being recorded, aren't we? Dublin is very frugal, Dublin is very frugal with its money, and it focuses its priorities. And one of the areas it does that is tree roots. And they have the luxury of being able to tackle those problems. And so when a sidewalk heaves because of a street tree root, they take it on themselves to fix it. They have the wherewithal to do that. If the sidewalk heaves because the homeowner's front yard tree caused it to heave, now it's on the homeowner.
So now we're going, I think that's a good thing. You just mentioned it. We're responsible for street trees, right? So if the street tree is causing a problem on the homeowner's property, would we be responsible for that? If it's
Like such
causing,
as what?
if
Like
the
a
street tree,
specific-
which we're responsible for, is causing heaving in the sidewalk, which is the homeowner's responsibility, could they argue that it's our responsibility?
Sidewalk's still in the right of way, but the owner.
In Delaware, when you look at how they mark, it's very telling. If the mark is on the curb side, it's a street tree issue. If the mark is on the homeowner side, it's caused on the homeowner side. So
Yeah.
that dictates who pays for what.
Okay.
If it's a blue mark, it's because of a water line, and so, there's a whole science to how it's marked and what the causes are. It may be more complicated than it needs to be, don't get me wrong, but I mean, that's how it goes.
It seems to be interpretable though, like there's
Yeah.
a science behind it, which is what we do not have
Exactly.
right now. And that's why we're like, well, what if?
Not everybody agreed with us, but we could explain why it was happening.
And it was consistently applied to all instances.
Yes.
Right.
And that's what we need.
We need that, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
The problem we are faced with right now, though, back to the $30,000 question is, by the time we would even get the whole thing vetted and through the process and come up with a new sidewalk plan, we still have, I don't know how you grade a safety issue. There's a safety issue over there on sidewalks. Like I know there have been kids that have fallen. Tim, you live in the neighborhood. I know there have been kids that have busted their mouth and face hitting bikes, rollerblades, walking.
Broken
Yeah,
down
it's-
watches.
Yeah, I'm not trying to use scare tactics. I'm just telling you that there will be more. The
I mean, it's
longer
a
it
tripping
goes.
hazard, yeah.
Well, so can we start the plan in that neighborhood and start it immediately? And then I guess with the assessment? As
Yeah.
far as
We gotta
asking,
assess it, right? Yeah.
yeah, so can we ask CT to,
Is there 51 homes affected approximately?
Gosh, I wish I would have my report, somewhere around there.
That's fine.
And I can send that report to council.
That's about-
I think it'd be a good idea to get it out to council and then, we can
That's
Really gonna put it up.
$500.
That's five, yeah.
For those 51 homes.
I think it's on the OneDrive, but we'll see to it till you get that.
75% of those, when they did their sidewalk survey, they indicated where there was approximate street trees, so I think a lot of them are gonna come back to the street tree.
In other words, that would be us anyways. Right. So, and back to my original point, like if it's, let's say it's 22,000 out of the $30,000 is going to be us anyways.
Yeah.
Do we just eat the 8 and say, listen, let's fix it as we're working through the process? I'm not trying to push you to a decision. I'm just saying, like,
Does it set a precedence?
I don't think so, because we're saying we're implementing a new policy to address this in the future.
Yeah, I
And
think
we're giving
The
them
way
a,
this came about was a year and a half ago. There was an individual who complained that a heaved sidewalk in some various states was causing a problem. We went out there, we deemed that, yes, the tree caused the problem. So we worked an arrangement with them, kind of a handshake thing, where we said, look, you're responsible for your sidewalk, but we recognize it was the tree. We will remove the tree, we'll remove the, grind the stump and all of that, and then you replace the sidewalk. And that was the agreement, but today, I don't believe the sidewalk's been replaced. So therein lies now, people hear that and say, wait a minute, if you're gonna do it, I'm not gonna pay for it. And
Right.
so it's kind of in flux right now. But that was the beginning of it, is us recognizing it, removing the hazard, but it still didn't fix the sidewalk.
Yeah, I think if we approach a situation as in we are forming a plan, we're not going to handle it like this in the future, but we're going to cover this particular set of repairs to get it done quicker, if nothing else.
There are some various states, I spent a lot of time in, they're a very vocal group, they're a great group, they're one of our older, our first subdivision. And they really thought they had at one point NHOA, and they didn't. So they had deteriorating things going on there. There was a gazebo in one of the ponds. We took that down. They weren't happy with it, but they recognized the village couldn't justify maintaining it as a park and what have you. And so a couple of the people who live around the ponds and things have come up to me and said, look, we understand that you've got a sidewalk plan of sorts. You have an ordinance, and I can only enforce it and we'll do it. But if you're not gonna enforce it, it's gonna be difficult. So I think it's mixed out there in terms of some are proponents of this and some are opponents of this.
right, agreed.
I think if you came up with a cost sharing plan like you're talking about, I don't see how you're gonna have much of a disagreement. You can have some disagreement, but for the most part, most people would agree with that. I mean, just taking a step forward and willing to take away part of the expense, it's reasonable. It's reasonable, the trees involved in the streetscape, street lawn, then we'll take care of that. You take care of this.
The grinding is not going to fix the problem.
Grinding the panels.
School for it, that's still only $500, and that's not gonna happen. Probably gonna be at least half of that. For a home. Couple $100, that's not much of a burden, that's a
We
transfer.
live
Out
on
of the taxes.
We live on the corner, it's a little more burdensome.
But that's if we coordinate the whole thing and put it together as a project as opposed to each individual homeowner doing it. Because I don't think we can rely on homeowners to do it. They just won't do it. And they'll see that the price is so much more. So I think we definitely need to get a plan together and assess each individual property, right? And then send them a notice and say, we're going to be doing this.
Give them plenty of time, maybe 6 months.
Yeah, we're going to be doing this in the next 6 months. If you want to handle it on your own, you're more than welcome to get it done before then and show us some notification or something, show us pictures or something like that. Otherwise, it's getting done in our program and you're getting billed this set dollar amount, right?
We've got to really nail down the standard though, because I know we've probably all heard the story where there was a resident in Delaware that had to, got the notice and replaced it themselves. And then basically Delaware came back and said, no, sorry, you're going to do it per our standard, even though it may have been to spec, but it didn't follow like, hey, you have to contact one of these 3 contractors. Like those are the ones we've approved to do it. They know our specs. They know all how we do it. So, yeah. The one thing I mentioned to Damon is the heaving, the grinding of it is not going to fix the issue. So in other words, like $30,000 gets us to, I would say, and the residents to baseline. Everything is code compliant, point in time today. After the winter, there's going to be some of those that are heaving more and are out of compliance again. And that, if we've got the code working to where we come up with a policy in place, I feel like, I think we're looking at this as like a longer term strategy and plan. And the $30,000, even though it's very expensive, is a drop in the bucket to us having conversations like this forever and not taking a stand on it. Yeah. So you'll get the data out to everybody. We'll be able to take a look at it, and you guys can discuss it next month.
Yeah,
Yeah, that'd be great.
if something to read by next month's meeting, and then we can, yeah. But
Just get through the roots at the tree shade.
it's a leisure reading, right? Okay, about doing the repairs, are we gonna do anything about getting us to that baseline though? Before we separate from talking about the program?
It may be a good idea to get the data out to everybody, get the Delaware policy out, and maybe at the finance meeting, talk about the expense. And where it gets to us, it would give everybody a chance to kind of weigh in on just, the financial burden of it, and potentially take action at our next.
Do we even need to
Council
review the Delaware plan if we've got an experienced individual here who's very well versed in this? I mean, I guess, what are your thoughts, Dave? Can we just have,
What Delaware has done is they've set forth your standards and your procedures on how they conduct these programs. And so it's set, and so it allows for consistency, it allows for turnover at the council level, at the administrative level, and yet the same game plan is there for everyone to follow year after year after year. I think it would be very wise if Sunbury were to develop some form of procedure. Now, does it have to be 27 pages? No, it can be 2. But we probably need to think about what is it our process going to entail, so that each time we visit this, we do it exactly the same way, and it isn't, we're not wrestling with the pig every time it comes up.
yeah,
You may even need to divide some of our estates into 2 or 3 phases or something too. Maybe not do it all at once and try to take bite-sized chunks out of it, but when you start to get the ball rolling, then the neighbors will start to say, oh, they're serious about this. My neighbor's stuff's looking good, I better do that too.
The question is, who develops it, right? Is that,
who develops the plan?
yeah,
That's kind of what I was thinking. Is that something we do in here, or is that something we ask you guys to do to?
It's
present to us?
typically something you ask your engineer to do, but we don't have to. You can do it yourself with your staff, and you've got some really talented, smart people that could put a lot of this stuff together. At some point, you will need a certified cost estimate, so you'll need an engineer to prepare your cost estimate and seal it for you, and to put together someone will have to put together a list of estimated assessments. We'll need council action. This is all set forth in, anybody know, 765, something like that is how you assess sidewalk projects through the LRC. So there's a series of ordinances and processes that you go through, and timelines and things that have to be in place and things like that. And that's why we get, yeah.
Do it that way.
And that's why we get involved, and somewhere in there, council will make a proclamation, or they will define what it is you're assessing. And you can assess the cost of inspections, and the cost of putting the books together, and the cost of advertising, and the cost of inspecting the construction, bidding, assessments, preparing the assessments. You can put all those costs into it. And suddenly your $30,000 project that you are assessing becomes a $50,000 or $60,000 project that you're assessing, because all these added, and Mr. Breen's costs can go in there too as well, because of the legal things. So if you want to capture all of it, you can put it all in there, or you can just decide, we're going to pay for all the engineering, we're going to pay for all the legal. That's on you. That's on council to decide how much they put into that and what they charge. And that's one of the benefits of doing it yourself, is that when you do it yourself, you only pay for the construction. You don't have to pay for any of the administrative stuff that led into to the assessments.
Does it get done right?
Okay, I want to move on. So we're gonna review all that material that Alan's gonna give us for the next meeting. Little Walnut Creek Interceptor Sewer obstacles. Power line movement. I don't know. That's who has information on that? I had not heard of obstacles.
I think Steve's here tonight to help.
Kathy, do you have the latest?
Oh,
I'm kidding.
So I'll be brief. I sent an email out to probably just a select number, just as an FYI, just so there's no surprises as things happen. The construction plans were prepared by someone other than CT, and they were prepared for Pat Shively, frankly. He was going to build this sewer as part of his Northgate development. So we as a city simply reviewed, as a village, simply reviewed it for the purpose of making sure that it was the right depth, the right size, the right location. We didn't really care about a lot of the minutiae and details. That's the developer's problem, right? Well, Mr. Shively obviously didn't build the thing, and ultimately Sunbury has taken it over and we're building it. So Sunbury purchased the rights to use the plans from the engineer that designed it, the engineer of record. Those plans have what we call an omission. Won't call it an error, but an omission. There are 2 buried electric lines that feed the subdivision to the north of the lift station. I assume we all know where the lift station is. And they are right where we need to put our first manhole. And they are on. And you can't turn them off without turning off the power to the subdivision or the majority of that subdivision. So we have a problem. I guess that's what you define as a problem. So we've been working with, so our contractor has been working with, and he's not willing to work around those power lines when they're on. I don't know what voltage they are, but more than he wants to mess with.
45,000.
Yeah,
What do you think? 13.5?
I thought it was the higher of the two.
Okay. it might
I was
be.
gonna say, I bet you it's 13.5, but yeah,
Yeah.
either way.
So
it's-
anyway, he's not messing with it until they get de-energized. AEP has come out and looked at it and said, yeah, we can put a new, they euphemistically call it relocating. They're not relocating, they're putting a new wire in, 2 new conduits and 2 new wires, and they'll hook it all up. And then we can de-energize the one that's in our way. So AEP, so we're stopped because he can't build from there at this moment. And we're working, AEP is working with the HOA. The HOA controls all that land down there. We have an easement to be on it, but it's actually the HOA's land. And they're trying to, AEP is trying to get an easement from them to put their new line in. And I'm sure there's just lawyers talking to lawyers, and that's the only thing holding it up at the moment. There will be a cost involved for their efforts and for constructing it. To this point in time, our contractor has not suggested a delay claim. That could come, but at this point, no. We allowed him to start at manhole 4. You don't usually do that. Manhole, sewers go like this in the ground, right?
Mhm.
So you usually start down here at the bottom where you're connecting into the existing system, and then you go, right? And you know that every pipe you put on is going to make it into the lift station. Well, we're going to start over here. And we're going to hope to hell that when he comes back this way, he's going to be able to hit the lift station. Now, the problem is, what we might normally do is we might have him expose that pipe right there and measure down and exactly where it is so we know. Because we're kind of just sort of guessing from plans because it's 27 feet in the ground. Well, he can't dig down because there's 2 energized power lines in his way. So he started over here and he's going. And at some point in time, he's going to get done. He's going to come back here and he's going to bring it back to our lift station. And hopefully by that time, the electric's been running around, de-energized, and everything's good. If he misses, if they miss, he's going to have to core a new hole in the side of our lift station. Not a big deal. Little money, but not a big deal. And a little time, probably taking a week to bring everything in and get that done. So that's the battle we're having right now. We didn't know those electric lines were there. Put a manhole right there. And now we're fighting it. If they had known the electric lines were there, we'd be having all these conversations during the design phase. Mr. Shively would have had these conversations with his engineer and AEP during the design phase. But they didn't know that. So now we're stuck trying to get this thing fixed while the bulldozer's out there idling.
So since it's an omission from a different engineering firm that I'm assuming had stamped drawings from a professional engineer, can we not go to them for the additional cost from AEP?
There's the guy that can answer that question. It was just perfect timing. So,
Always had a dollar for every time you ask.
so the challenge is that the answer is, I don't know.
Yeah,
The challenge is we didn't hire them to design the plans. We only purchased the rights to use the plans. So I don't, there's potentially some gray area in there.
Yep.
And we have to figure that out.
okay.
Now, I did reach out to the engineer and I asked him to verify, to demonstrate to me that they sent the plans to AEP and that AEP sent back something that said, looks great.
Yeah.
I have they sent me a transmittal letter, a copy of a transmittal letter from 2017, where they sent AEP the plans. They've not sent me yet anything on AEP's response.
Probably said it wasn't, can't do it.
Or they didn't send it back and nobody followed up. That's something that happens a lot in our business.
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of where we are. There's going to be, right now, what we're trying to do is get the problem solved. And then we'll figure out who's the responsible party. And it may require a judge. It may require someone to just say, yes, we're culpable and we're gonna make it right.
Yep.
So, yeah.
I
Okay,
doubt anyone says that, but okay.
I'm sorry, sir.
I said, I doubt anyone says we're culpable and we'll make it right, but
so our status on this is wait and see then?
The status on this problem is, yes, we're working on it and you should keep your ear to the rail, but your actions are not needed at this time. We will advise you as we learn more and things start to gel more. But he is working. It's not like he pulled off because he couldn't do it. He just started him up the line a little farther.
The reason I brought it up is it's the largest capital improvement project that we've authorized in the past 4 years I've been here. So I wanted to make sure everybody was on board with challenges, timelines, if you get questions.
Absolutely. Stormwater. Bachman, what are we talking about there? I don't know any of these.
Maugham Street is a flat street. One side is curved. It's along the intermediate school. The other side does not have curbs. Anytime it rains, street floods. The water doesn't dissipate quickly, and there's not an easy fix for it. I wanted to mention it to this body because we need to be thinking about ways to address stormwater issues. One thing that we did a couple of years ago is we went through, the GIS mapped our entire stormwater system. That gives us a really nice, kind of aerial view of where we have storm drains and things of that nature. Other municipalities handle the expenses related to stormwater in various ways. One of the ways is you implement a stormwater assessment fee. We've talked about this in the past, and not an assessment fee, excuse me.
It's a stormwater utility.
Utility fee.
So it's a utility
That's a
fee.
very specific term. But basically, you start building up a little bit of a way to pay for situations like this, where it's probably going to be a significant fix. Unless you're redoing the street, it doesn't make a lot of practical sense to just tear it out and redo it.
We just repaved.
What's that?
We just repaved.
We repaved it like two or
A
3
year or
years
two
ago.
ago, yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to mention it. I've received at least 2 emails from residents on the street, literally on the parade route when I was circling back around on the street, and I see the flooding, and I see the resident who communicated with me, and I said, I see the flooding. So I wanted to make sure that I brought it up to this body. We can get you pictures. It's not uncommon, especially when it hasn't rained for a while and then you get a heavy rain, that happens. But it happening all the time, there's something engineering wise that is not correct. And whether that's, it's not, anytime you add angles into pipes and fluids are going in them, that can slow the dissipation rate. I don't have the answer. I'm not an engineer. I know there's flooding and I know it's a nuisance. Whether it's a safety issue, I don't know. I would say it's more of a nuisance and potentially could be harmful if it got really bad. Does anybody else want to weigh in on that? This is probably more of a tee up conversation than it is. Hey, we need to do something.
Does the stormwater utility fee go on like the sewer bill monthly to all the residents? Is that how that usually works?
Yeah, it could. Yeah, and usually, if I'm not mistaken, it's something like a flat. Other municipalities have done like flat fee based on, or no, never mind. Oh, we're gonna get detailed. I know it's the roof calculation.
So I have a lot of experience with this because
You don't say.
I did the stormwater utility for Reynoldsburg back in 2000 or whenever it was. And so I put together the documentation to demonstrate the need, support it, put together the capital improvements program, the operations needs of the utility, and derived what would be, derived what would be the fee. We use impervious area as our nexus. If you have twice as much impervious area, then you pay twice as much as the other guy. And what we said was that every residential house in town, regardless of how much square footage of impervious area they had, was equal to 1 equivalent residential unit. And so they paid a fee of 1. And around these parts, that 1 generally equates to about $3 to $5 a month. Okay. In my day, it was 99 cents, something like that. So then for all the non-residential, we measured using the aerial photos and the county auditor's GIS, we measured the impervious area of each and every non-residential parcel. And I think that 1 ERU was equal to 2,350 square feet. And so if you had 23,500 square feet, you were 10 ERUs and you got to build $10 a month instead of $1 a month, $1 a month. So to your point, yes, for the residents, well, for everyone, it's a flat fee. It's you pay this every month, but for the residents, it's generally in the $3 to $5 a month range. That money goes into the stormwater utility. And generally the ordinance that pass place it into an account that can only be used for stormwater related issues. I know the street department and I had a lot of arguments on whether curbs and gutters were stormwater facilities that they could use that money to fix. And we said, no, those are streets. So, so if it was $3 a month, and I don't know, Alan, if you can help me, 1,500 houses? 1,900, yeah. Let's say 2,000 then, so $6,000 a month. In Reynoldsburg, it was really even. We had about an equal revenue from the commercial side as we did from the home side. So if Sunbury's equivalent, you'd have about $12,000 a month that you would generate in revenue for addressing stormwater issues, new storm sewers, flooded areas that need new basins, things like that. So, and the beauty of it is, if there is a beauty to it, the beauty of it is that people hate taxes and they hate fees, but if they know that it's going to something that's going to fix this problem, they can sort of get behind it. If they thought it was just going in the general fund and it could be used on willy-nilly anything, they don't support it. But if you tell them you're going to fix stormwater problems in town, almost everyone in town can tell you where there's a stormwater problem, and half of them are in their backyards.
Yeah,
And
I got one in my front yard, so yeah.
and so now they're thinking, hey, I'm finally going to get this thing fixed. And for $3 a month, Yeah, I'll support that. So yeah, it's not a bad deal. Now on Bauman, we're doing a quick little review. We're trying, Dale did some camera work and he thinks he knows where the storm sewers are. We're gonna see if we can just spend a couple of hours and come up with some ideas and some costs for those ideas on how we might get this one area to drain.
Visit this next month.
Yeah, sounds like, again, we need to spend some time developing policy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's come up a lot.
We're gonna be coming up with a lot of plans
Lot
for
of
CT
policy.
And once again, I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but I'm not sure what objects in ROW are.
What?
The
Last-
last agenda point, the objects in ROW. Oh, that's
Right.
those right away.
Basketball hoops. Yeah, you're up.
Oh, are we talking about basketball hoop?
Yes.
Ah.
I neglected to invite all the interested parties.
Okay.
Which I apologize for. If you've got a homeowner that's not happy about it, you've got some adjacent homeowners that are using that particular hoop. You've got other hoops that are proximate, but they're portable. So it will be a matter of, do we say to everyone, the hoops have to be out of our right of way, whether they're fixed or mobile, allowing them maybe to bring the mobile one in to play and then remove it at the end of the day type of situation.
Is there really an issue if it's not fixed in the first place at all? The issue is that you can't move the fixed one when you need to. So if somebody puts a temporary one there, that's still against code?
It just becomes an equal treatment type of issue.
Hmm.
You know, you could make it that no fixed occupants in the right of way, which I think is probably the code right now.
I thought that was what we decided. Was that, or didn't we?
Well, we talked about it. We hadn't done anything official because
Okay,
we hadn't had a services meeting. So,
gotcha.
yeah.
Okay.
So I guess,
Do we need to put it to a vote? Is that like, does it need to come to a council meeting and be brought to a vote, or do we just decide here in the services meeting officially what we're?
I think we need to know exactly
Or-
what is code and do we just enforce it as is, or do we ignore it, or do we attempt to change it?
Because
Those
we
are
can't
the
ignore the
options, right?
permanent one. Because it's
I
been
don't
brought to
think so.
our attention,
Yeah.
but if something's able to be moved, I mean, I guess I don't see the problem with that. If it's not a permanent.
I spoke to the resident and the base is permanent technically, but there's 4 bolts holding it. So he can remove it. There's 4 bolts he can take out and take the hoop down. So now there's a hole in the ground where the hoop actually sits, but technically it can be removed.
Yeah,
So,
so it's a removable basketball hoop,
correct.
just like any other one that's got a
I
big.
mean, technically.
It's not a rollable basketball.
It's not
hoop.
rollable.
Like, you're not pulling it out.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, it sounds like it's movable. It's able to be taken down and moved out of the right of way, right?
The pole is. The pole on the backboard.
Yeah.
Yes, the pole in the back.
Which is what our problem is, right? Because the pole.
I mean, it's not just that hoop though. We're talking about like, okay, if you put a basketball hoop on a telephone pole, if you like, I don't know, install the American flag in the tree lawn, you know, it's things like that.
Once again, it comes down to precedence and setting what is our control over the right of way, right? What do we allow and what don't we allow, and then sticking to it.
Well, in this particular case, I mean, what brought the issue to light was a neighbor who said, you know, they put in a permanent basketball hoop right off of my back porch. And there's basketball games going on there all the time. And, you know, I know this because I have a basketball hoop in my barn. We have people who are just sitting there, basketball hoops pounding beside you. It's hard to enjoy yourself, right? You can't really relax. It's bang, 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 bang. And that's what he's complaining about. The other problem is, of course, there's a full basketball court in that community that's literally a quarter mile away
Right.
from this particular location. It's not as convenient as right around the corner on my street, 3 houses down. But, you know, the residents said, well, how is this allowed? How can they put a basketball hoop on a public street? Again, and it is a dead end. It's teed to go into the next neighboring field someday. Hasn't happened yet. But it is different than a roll-away hoop, which you sometimes see in cul-de-sacs and things of that nature where the kids pull it down in and no one's complaining about it. But it's a roll-away hoop. Then it's usually got a net that's not in good shape and it's a roll-away backboard and it's, you know, it doesn't invite
Mhm.
a 5-on-5 basketball game for 6 hours a day or whatever.
So is the issue that, I guess, but the residents' issue is that they're playing basketball and it's annoying.
Nuisance complaint, correct.
But if we remove the permanent one, they could put in a temporary one and the issue doesn't go away, right?
I would think not, right? I mean, potentially, yeah, you're right. It doesn't exactly solve it.
So I think we're gonna need to speak on this again later because we're at 7:30 and we need to move on. So I guess we'll gloss over new business. There's a lot of new business there. And I'll move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Roll call.
Damon Campbell,
Yes.
Martin Fisher,
Yes.
Rick Elliott.
Yes.
3 yeas.
Thank you. Where did they go? Tommy took it.
Probably a long service.
They used to be pretty long. We just had a bunch of real short ones here recently.
No, okay. No.
No,
Yeah,
you're
but I need to look
right.
up. No.
Yeah, still got the end that meeting.
Good, how about you?
Good, good to see you.
One handful before we.
Ooh, that sounds good. I'll take that weird one that just fell out.
Dave, I saw your calculator. Reminded me of my dad. My dad got one of those.